Good evening. My name is Steve Obsitnik. I think the single most important issue facing Connecticut is leadership in your governor. The first night I went to sea, I went to the Naval Academy. I did my submarine service out of Groton. And I got on board as a lieutenant junior grade, and they said, "You're going up to the Arctic Circle." And the first night we went, the captain took me to do a zone inspection back in the engineering space. And as I was back there for 3 hours, at one point he said, "Steve, I'm going to give you the one leadership lesson you need to know for the rest of your life. Leaders set tone, tone creates a culture, and culture is your destiny." Leaders set tone, tone creates culture, culture is your destiny. I had no idea what the man was talking about at the time. But after watching a lot of leaders in the military and business, and watching this governor, what we do have is a governor whose tone is the chief apologizer. He's the chief tax collector. He's the chief evictor of people from the state of Connecticut. My tone will be very different. But his tone has created a culture of defeatism and survivalism, and we know what the destiny is. 100 people a day being evicted from this state. A 30% reduction from the peak of the housing crisis. 30% longer it takes to get anywhere in this state. And our taxes going up by over $2 billion. So my tone is very different. I will be the chief tax cutter of the state of Connecticut. I will be the chief spending cutter of the state of Connecticut. I will be the chief economic development officer of the state of Connecticut. That will be my tone. And my plan when we get into it tonight will allow people to breathe and say, you know what, I can actually live in Connecticut, build a family in Connecticut, build a career, and retire with dignity once again. This is all about leadership and then execution. That's what the military taught me. That's what business taught me. So I look forward to getting into more specifics. Thank you. This election will be about 3 words: makers versus takers. Makers versus takers. For 40 years, Democratic leaders in Hartford have been takers. And they have set up agreements that have taken from your pocket and gone into their pocket. And now we can't pay for it any longer. So you have to decide, who do you want to solve these problems in Hartford from a leadership standpoint? A maker or a taker? I am a maker. I am a job maker. I'm a founder. I have that mentality of solving problems. I believe the way we talk about this is we have to restore fiscal stability to our state. Fiscal stability to a retiree who's counting on a pension. Fiscal stability to a new worker who wants some benefit. And fiscal stability to a taxpayer who is tired paying more than their fair share. So I believe day one, you start with a 100-day financial state of emergency on day one. You invite the unions in 100 days to solve this. This is not hard as far as what the knobs are to turn to solve this problem. They are well documented. I've talked to many experts. The question is, do we have the will as a state? Do the union leaders have a will to solve this problem so they can bring fiscal stability back to workers, or not? And if they don't, in that period of time, then you have to look into the state constitution at things like the Sovereign Immunity Clause, which allows the governor and the legislator to change contracts so that we stay solvent. You have to have that focus. My grandfather once told me that, when you apply heat to iron, you get steel. Well, I am a battle-tested, hardened piece of steel who will make sure that we do not go bankrupt as a state. I'm here to serve you, and then when I'm done as your governor, 1 term, 2 terms, or God forbid 3 terms, I go home. I don't want anything else from you. Don't want to be your failed U.S. Senator, your failed U.S. Congressman. I run into this fire, we put out the fire, and I go home. Thank you.
Steve Obsitnik, military background, high-tech background. Everybody talks about Connecticut having a vibrant high-tech economy, an innovation economy. Everyone looks to Massachusetts in envy, to New York in envy. Is it possible to do it here? How do you?
Yeah, great question. It is possible, but not with the current regime that's leading us. I was involved with one company which you may talk to her a lot. Her name is Siri on your iPhone. And I apologize, she's not perfect. But that was started out in California. And there were 2 Yale professors who actually were involved in Siri early on. Can you imagine if Siri had been born in New Haven instead of Palo Alto, what we'd be talking about? So it is possible, but what we have to do is first start with what we do really well. And I forgot my map out of my RV, but I talk about building career corridors from Enfield to New Haven, from Groton to Greenwich, because in that 91-95 corridor, broadly defined, there are 42 trade schools to universities. There are 24 Fortune 1000 companies who have not evicted themselves yet. Right? They put up with a lot of misery. They do want to be here. What we need is a governor who finally enables these trade schools to universities to actually speak with these businesses, because there are 50,000 job openings in this state right now, 7,000 software programmers. EB has about 15,000 people, and I can go into other industries. So we need to create a supply chain of trained people for these jobs to keep them here. And it is possible, but the government does not have to do it all. Because my last business was in Rochester, New York. Why did it go there? Applied research universities, skilled workforce, manufacturing and supply chain. That's why that business is in Rochester. We have to play with those same assets around industries we do well. I have a 5-step plan to build 300,000 jobs over the next 8 years. It's on my website, and I'd love to go deeper in with you. Thank you. You know, the governor of Illinois, people say he hasn't been that successful because he has this Democratic legislator and he can't get anything done. But I think we should all give a round of applause because he's the one that filed this case, and he's the one that will bring right to work to the state of Connecticut now. So thank you, Governor Rauner out in Illinois. You know, I think you're going to find alignment between all of us here. This is needed to turn the state around. And when we saw in Wisconsin, when effectively the same thing happened within their state, they lost union membership by like 80–90% within a year. So it's just taking money out of hardworking state employees' pockets. Once again, that's what takers do. The union bosses were taken out of their pocket, and many people I've talked to in the state, be it teachers or state workers, don't want to be part of it. So let's bring it on. It's time for right to work in Connecticut. Yeah, I was born and raised Catholic, and it's obviously a very personal decision, I think, for everyone to consider. I think Tim said it right, that the chance of it being overturned at a federal level and then at a state level is small. That being said, this election needs to be about Dan Malloy. We cannot allow Ned Lamont, retread Ned, to take these issues out there and mobilize a base around if it's Donald Trump or social issues. This has to be about how Dan Malloy has destroyed 30,000 jobs in the state of Connecticut, how he's destroyed 30% of our housing value, why it takes 30% longer to get anywhere in this state. We've got to keep the focus on the customers of Connecticut, the taxpayers, and that's what I will fight for. Look, at Annapolis, we all learn how to box, to take a punch, to throw a punch, to get knocked down, and to get back up. And I will fight and prosecute this election about the destruction of the quality of life of the people of Connecticut. That's what you'll get from me this election. On the first point on the division with our president, I'm a military veteran, and I will always support our commander-in-chief, period. What I've learned in the military and the Navy, when I've gone through tough times, or maybe in not so tough times, but when I found myself on a Saturday morning about 500 feet under the polar ice cap, 2 knots to nowhere, and you got to get about 150, 200 men out of bed to go clean the bilges. You know, you don't pull out the Uniform Code of Military Justice and say, I'm a lieutenant and you're enlisted, get in the bilge. What you do is you get in the bilge with them, you know? And you roll up your sleeves and you start talking. And you understand their interests and their aspirations and what their goals are. And along the way, then you start defining what our mission is and why are we here to drive alignment. That's why I believe my plan, my 5-step plan to build 300,000 jobs over the next 8 years is an important vision and goal for us. Because that will unite Republican, Democrat, and Independent. Because who in this room does not want 300,000 jobs? Right? And the reality is, since I graduated from high school in Stanford, we've created 5,000 total net new jobs. And yes, in those plans, we need to get taxation down, size of government down, make it easier to start a business in Connecticut, address our education and infrastructure, and build these career corridors that I talked about. But this is all about leadership and tone and how you align and mobilize teams of people and larger populations together on a bigger goal, just like I did in that little submarine under the polar ice cap. Everyone talks about, you want money to follow the child or not. We already have money to follow the child. It's called moving. And we have too many people moving out of the state. Look, I'm going to focus in my 1 minute on this. The largest part of your town budget is education, 70% plus or minus. There are 169 towns that actually do really well with their education system for the most part. With those 160 towns, we have to look at the 1,200 unfunded mandates and remove as many of those as possible so you all can educate your kids, number one. Number two, what's bumping up property taxes is the minimum budget requirement, which means that your town, if you could save 10% this year on education without impacting the quality of it, you can only save 1%. Unfunded mandates, we get rid of. Minimum budget requirement, get out, so you all can set what you want to spend on education. Hartford shouldn't decide it, you all should decide it. I didn't know spokesman made so much money. I went in the wrong line of work. Look, in my 5-step plan of 300,000 jobs, step 1 is make government smaller and more efficient. $3.5 billion of annual savings, detailed and outlined. Okay, and I'd love to go into that afterwards. I'll buy a beer and go through all 3.5 billion of them. We have this Department of Labor as one example. The Department of Labor audited 92 sports leagues in 2016. What type of sports leagues? Oh, like Southington lacrosse, kids lacrosse, Westport field hockey, infield football. Why did they go and audit these sports leagues? Because those referees on the weekend, we probably have some referees in this room, the referees, they said, aren't contractors, you shouldn't just be paid hourly, you're actually full-time employees. And you should have the right to unionize. So if the Department of Labor has enough labor to audit our own kids' sports leagues, I think that's one big line item to focus on. One other example, too, is UConn Hospital. Why are we putting $500 million a year into a hospital? That should probably go to the private sector, and they probably can run it much better. Hartford Healthcare or whoever wants to buy it. And I'll tell you my quick DMV story. Last summer I went in there with my father-in-law to re-register a car. D107 was my number. And as we're sitting there, a woman comes in hour 3, a woman comes in dressed really nicely. She goes, I've got to get back to work. I can't stay here. The guy next to me gets up and says, well, ma'am, would you like my ticket? She said, that's very nice of you. What can I give you? And he goes, $100 would be nice. She gives him $100. She goes up in the line. He picks up his bag and he goes to leave. I said, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I do this every day. He is the entrepreneur of the DMV. It probably pays better than the spokesman. And I had a fundraiser like 4 months later. I'm telling this story. The woman sheepishly said in Darien, yeah, that was me.
So, enough for story time, let's talk about reality. When we talk about then, how are we going to cut taxes to fund tax cuts? Because everybody here is talking about tax cuts. We need to cut spending in order to make room for them. Otherwise, it's empty promises. And everybody in this room knows all about empty promises. And so we talk about on our website, again, I keep coming back to it, we talk about the numbers here. We talk about how much we're going to cut taxes and how we're going to pay for it. We talk about spending cuts in 3 areas: economize, privatize, and prioritize. What do I mean economize? Well, who in this room thinks that our public sector workers should be paid 40% more than what everybody else is being paid in this room? Not a chance. Second thing, who in this room thinks that we should be spending $425,000 per mile of highway when it only costs $180 for the rest of the country? Okay? The second thing, privatize. So we have a report saying if we were to take these social services and privatize them over 5 years, we could save $1.2 billion. That's real money. The last is prioritize. So this legislature, if you can believe it, they start by spending money first, and then they kick it over to the tax guys and say, go find a way to pay for it. What kind of household, what kind of business could make it work that way?
No to sanctuary cities, no to a sanctuary state. I patrolled these waters off here in a nuclear submarine, and I protected and kept us safe, and I will keep us safe as your governor. I took the oath twice to support and defend the Constitution. Safety is critical. I'm a law-abiding citizen. Our towns have to be that way. That is why our system and our state and our nation works well, because we have been law-abiding citizens. And towns that are sanctuary cities won't put their funding at risk. They will lose their funding if they are sanctuary cities and do not work with the state. Look, this is... Answer with a straight face. I think what we have to do is take it to the voters. Do you trust, because this election will be about trust and character, do you trust your governor to be, who has been a convicted felon for corruption? Do you want that person to be your governor?
No!